Hi everyone, my name is Muir. I work in JBoss engineering at Red Hat, and I work on a number of things. In particular, one of the things I work on, which I'm here to talk about today, is our developer program, and the way that we recommend you build applications using the JBoss stack. So what I'm going to do is take you through a little bit of detail about the JBoss Way, explain what it is, why it's useful for you. I'm then going to spend quite a good proportion of the session talking about or showing you how you can build an application using some of the tooling we have. So I'm going to build a simple application using JBoss Developer Studio. It's going to connect to a database. It's going to have a very simple CRUD view that's built using JavaScript and REST endpoints. I'm going to put that up on OpenShift, get that up and running on our platform as a service, OpenShift. I'm going to add an Apache Cordova view for that so that we could build it out into a native mobile phone application. And again, I'll show you some of the tooling we have in JBoss around Apache Cordova that makes it easy to develop applications for mobile phones. Then I will go on and add some extra capabilities to the application, such as testing, perhaps a MySQL database. We'll just see how time goes and see how much we can add to the application. And then at the end, I want to share with you a few notes I have about xPaas, which is how we're extending the OpenShift platform as a service to cover all of the products that we offer through the JBoss middleware stack. So you heard me mention very briefly there the JBoss Way. So what is the JBoss Way? Well, the simplest way to explain the JBoss Way is just to give you a little bit of background about why we wanted to introduce the JBoss Way. So our experience has been that over the last few years, we've offered lots and lots of projects and a number of different products. And we've had many projects. We have over 100 different projects in many different areas, in mobile, rich internet applications, integration, business logic, security, etc., etc. And these are a great set of frameworks that you can build your applications using. But unfortunately, what we found was that there were quite mixed results. Some people did quite well, and some people didn't do so well with building applications with these technologies. What we really found was something that some people build an application that looks a bit like this, whereas some build something that looks really pretty and really nice. And we wanted to make sure that everyone was building something that looked good. And we felt that the right way to do that was to be much more opinionated about how you build applications. So we actually provide a recommended approach for building applications. So to sum up the very brief introduction of what the JBoss Way is, well, it's a recommended approach with a single architecture, a cohesive architecture. And our goal throughout the design of the JBoss Way was to make you as productive as you can be at building applications. And this last point is really, really important because there's nothing better than a happier developer, and developers who are happy tend to be those who are productive. So what do we include in the JBoss Way? Well, as I mentioned, and I'm going to mention this throughout the presentation, it's a recommended approach. So we've tried to suggest a number of ways that you might want to build an application. And we start off by having a number of quick starts. What are quick starts? Quick starts, quite simply, show you how to solve a particular problem. So they might be showing you how to solve a particular use case, or they might be showing you how to use a particular API. And here we've got examples of both. We've got, for example, how you could use a really simple example of how you could use JMS. That's how you can use an API. But also, we might have the case that we want to do communication between two different servers. And so we have an example that shows you how you can use EJB to do that. Each quick start comes with a set of instructions that shows you how to get started with the quick start, how to deploy it to the server, how to get up and running, how to run any tests, how to load it into the IDE, how to debug the quick start. And then each quick start also has extensive code comments so that you can understand by looking at the code and looking at the quick start how you can how the application is built, why the application is built the way it is, and also attempting to be a really good starting point for you to copy and paste that code into your own project to either get started with a new project or to solve that problem in your own project. But of course, in some cases, a quick start which shows you how to use a single API or shows you how to use or solve a single problem isn't really enough. sometimes you want to see how can you put a much larger application together. And so for that reason, we've also built out a 150-page tutorial that shows you how to build a typical web application using the JBoss stack. So the application connects to a database. It has a backend built using CDI, context and dependency injection, which I'll talk a little bit about more in just a minute. It has REST endpoints that allow you to talk to the application from the outside world. A front end built using popular JavaScript technologies like Backbone and AngularJS. It also connects to a data grid to show you how to help scale. We've got options for things like using Hibernate search, enable you to do a search over the application, etc., etc. And of course, it's all up and running on our platform as a service. So again, we provide instructions for how to deploy up there. If you want to get started with either Quick Starts or Ticketmonster, the tutorial, then the best thing to do is visit our website, www.jboss.org, and click the Get Started button. And you'll be guided through to how to download all of these materials, how to access all of these tutorials, etc., etc. So to sum up, what we provide to help you get started with the JBoss Way is over 150 quick starts, and these are growing by the day. We have quick starts that cover many areas. So we have a lot that cover things like building applications for JBoss EAP, but also for BRMS, for Data Grid, for Portal, etc., etc. So we try to cover all of the product range with quick starts. Tutorials, which I mentioned, talked about. We have an extensive number of videos, I think over 150, 200 videos, showing you, which come from a whole range of sources, come from webinars that have been recorded, short screencasts that people have recorded, recordings of conferences. So that's a great way to get into a little more depth on a particular technology. The JBoss Migration Center shows you how you can migrate to EAP from other platforms. So, for example, from WebLogic or WebSphere over to other platforms, it gives you a number of resources to help you with that. And the list goes on. I mentioned at the beginning that a really important point of the JBoss Way is making you productive. And our central tool for making you productive is JBoss Developer Studio. And I'll be showing you this in quite a lot of detail later on in the demo. JBoss Developer Studio also provides very quick access to the quick starts and to the tutorial, as well as easy ways to get started with new projects using Maven archetypes. We also have the software update feature in JBoss Central, JBoss Developer Studio's JBoss Central feature, which allows you to quickly install recommended add-ons that allow you to do things with JBoss Developer Studio. So, for example, there you can see on the screen we've got the JBoss Hybrid Mobile Tools, which I'm going to be using later to help build that Apache Cordova front end for my application. JBoss Developer Studio comes with an extensive range of tools for building mobile applications and also for integrating with OpenShift. And again, we're going to see all of those in just a few minutes. The second point of the JBoss Way is this idea of a cohesive architecture. And our architecture is based firmly on the Java EE stack. We believe that building on top of standards is really important because it allows you to build an application where not only is the application portable if needed and easy to migrate from different versions of different servers, but also means that it's easy to find developers to build your application because you're building around a standardized, well-recognized platform. And it's easy for you as a developer to build up a reusable skill set. So lots of reasons for building on top of standards. So more specifically, our stack is based on the base layer on JPA. So that allows you to talk to the database. And we also provide options like Data Grid there as well. In the business layer, the core of our stack is based around context and dependency injection, but we also support specifications like EJB, or you can use Spring if you want to. And we recognize that in the view layer, there are many, many options out there, and there's lots of innovation, and the pace of change is very fast. So we've tried to support as many different options as we can at this layer to allow you that choice and the option to choose. But as I said at the beginning, we also provide this recommended path. So we've picked a few of those that we think are best for building out your view layer. And In particular, we are very focused on HTML5 and JavaScript, and particularly the AngularJS and Backbone frameworks within that, as well as, of course, things like jQuery Mobile for building mobile phone applications. Or if you prefer to use Java Server Faces, JSF, the Rich Faces component suite provides a really easy way to get started building rich applications. Let me give you a short introduction to some other elements of the stack. So as I mentioned, CDI. CDI is something that we're very proud of. It's a specification that we developed from scratch and added to Java EE. And I think it's certainly fair to say that it has become the foundational component of Java EE. As Java EE develops and matures, and we see things like Java EE 7 come in JBoss EAP 7, you'll really start to see how CDI is becoming more and more a core part of the Java EE platform. It's what wires the whole platform together and gives you your application access to services. CDI, we think CDI is a great technology because it allows you to easily build applications in a decoupled fashion. And this is great, especially if you have a larger team of developers, because one person can build one thing and test it, and another person can build another thing and test it, and then you can very easily wire those together. It's got a lot of features to allow you to do this. Obviously injection, as the name suggests, but also things like the event bus, basic AOP through interceptors and decorators. These technologies all allow you to do that. It also works in a type-safe fashion. So this means that rather than using strings to identify bits of things that we want to wire together, instead we use the Java type. And this allows the compiler and the IDE to work in its raw form without too much extra tooling on top, and gives you an environment in which everything should work. Other productivity tools we offer. So we offer a testing framework called Arquillian that makes it extremely easy to test your applications inside the container. I just want to spend a brief moment here. There are lots of different ways of testing and lots of different philosophies around testing. And the one that we believe in quite strongly is the idea that you should test your application in an environment that's as close to the production environment as possible. And you should make it as easy as possible to do that. Why is this important? Well, quite simply, the further away you get from your production environment when you're testing your application, the less useful your test is, because it's not really replicating the environment you're working in. You've got more and more changes as you move closer to your production environment. And what Arquillian helps you to do is very easily package up your tests, deploy them to the application server, to EAP or to WildFly, or to any of the other application servers out there, and run the test in the application server. You can even do things like run the test up on the PaaS, and if you're using something like OpenShift, we provide connectors from Arquillian to connect to OpenShift and run your tests up there. And in that case, you could really run your tests incredibly close to your production environment. JBoss Forge is our tool for rapid application development. I'm going to show you this in quite a lot of detail later on. But very simply, what it allows you to do is build up your applications, select the technologies you want, build out the application really quickly by scaffolding elements of the application, like your persistence layer, your business layer, your view layer, and build out CRUD screens from that very, very fast. One of the technologies I'm going to be using today is JBoss EAP. It's worth mentioning that we also, as probably most people are aware, have a number of upstream projects, such as WildFly, which is the basis for EAP. JBoss EAP 6 is based around Java EE6, whereas WildFly is based around the newer version of Java EE7. So there are a number of improvements in Java EE7, but I'm going to be sticking to EAP as it's, I think it has everything I need in order to be productive and build this application. And it's also going to be supported for a long time. So if I was building a real application, I would know that it was going to be available for a good long time. So that's enough with the introduction. I now want to show you some of this in action. So I'm just going to exit the presentation and bring up JBoss Developer Studio. So I'm running JBoss Developer Studio 8 here. JBoss Developer Studio 8 Beta 2, in fact. This is the new version of JBoss Developer Studio. It will be beta 1 is available on jboss.org now, and beta 2 will be available very shortly on jboss.org. I'm using this new version in particular because I wanted to show you some of the new features that we've got coming in Forge, and also some of the really nice improvements we've got around the mobile tooling in JBoss Developer Studio. So let's get started. So as I said, I'm going to be using Forge. Forge is really easily accessible in JBoss Developer Studio. It comes built into the main distribution, and you just press Command 4 or Control 4, and it will start up JBoss Forge and give you the window to enable you to start interacting with Forge. Forge is also usable from the command line, so if you're a command line junkie, you can very easily download Forge as an independent standalone distribution and run it from your command line. It's also there's someone who's working at the moment on an IntelliJ plugin, so there's lots of different options for how you can use Forge. So Forge is now up. So the first thing I need to do, of course, is create a new project. So I select the new project option from Forge. So I'm just watching as well my share, and I've got a little bit of lag, so I'm going to go reasonably slowly through this demo. So hopefully, so you can actually see what I'm doing as I go. So I'm going to select the new project, and this brings up the new project dialog, which allows me to put things like the project name in. So I'm going to be creating a very simple session tracking application for a conference like this, where we could, be tracking who's going to sessions, who's attending sessions, who's presenting at sessions, etc., etc. Okay, so this is the very simple creates a new project. Okay, so I'm going to click finish, and that goes away and creates this new project. So it's going to create me a project, a Java EE web application project based around Maven. It's going to import that into Eclipse for me, and it's going to give me the ability to execute more Forge commands on the project. So once again, I press Control or Command 4, and now you'll see that I get a number of different options about things I can do. So in order to build this application, I'm going to need various technologies installed. So I'm going to start by adding some of those technologies to my project. So as I mentioned, the first thing I'm going to add is CDI, because that's our sort of foundational business layer. So I select CDI setup. It allows me to select the version I want. In this case, I want version 1.0 because I'm using Java EE 6, and CDI 1.0 comes in Java EE 6. And you'll find it selects the right version by default for you. I'm going to go ahead and add some more technologies. I'm going to keep doing this at a reasonable speed, so this may lag slightly on your screens. But I'll just talk you through what I'm doing. So having added CDI, the next thing I want to do is make sure I have JPA, which is to allow me to interact with the database. So I choose JPA setup again. Again, it gives me the dialog, what version do I want, which container am I going to be connecting to, which provider am I using. The reason for that is just so that we can configure the application correctly. And again, it's going to select the right versions for me by default. Okay, I'm also going to install bean validation. Bean validation is a simple technology that allows us to put constraints on our entities and have those constraints applied at all layers of the application. Well, what does that mean? So what that means is I can put something like, put an annotation on a field in my entity and say that this field must, by using that annotation, say that this field must contain an email address. And what bean validation will do, which is very clever, is apply that at all layers of the application. So it can provide it, it can apply that in the persistence layer. It can run the regular expression, or however we're validating it's an email address, when the entity is persisted. So that's really good because it stops the database getting polluted with bad data. But also, it can then run this in the business layer or in the view layer, which allows us to more easily connect the fact that there was an error on a particular field back to the right error message to display to the user. You can, of course, also solve this by applying the, selecting you want the validation in 2 different places. But then, of course, you end up, if you end up having to refactor your code, you're going to end up having to refactor that in 2 places or 3 places, which is not ideal. So let me go ahead and do that and add that. And as usual, I get a short dialog box, which allows me to select options. I'm always choosing the default with those. And the final thing I'm going to want to do is add REST, or JAX-RS, so that we can communicate with the application. JAX-RS is the Java EE specification that provides a RESTful set of an easy way to provide RESTful endpoints to your application through annotations and through annotating your POJOs. Let me do that. So I'm going to choose REST setup, and again choose all the default options. So I've now got an application which has got a persistence layer, a business layer, and a way of talking to it from the outside world. So the next thing I'm going to do in order to get my application up and running is to add some entities. So that at least we've got a way of putting something in the database, storing some data. And I'm going to keep using Forge to do that. So I press F4, Command 4 again, and this time I'm going to select that I want a new entity from the list. So the first entity I'm going to enter is one called attendee. So that's the person who's attending the session. So I just hit finish, enter the name and hit finish. And that gives me a basic entity with the basic fields that I'm going to need for the entity setup. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this is all about a recommended approach. So we're trying very here to be somewhat opinionated about how you should create your entities. I'm also going to create another entity called session that allows us to track what sessions people are attending. Attendees are going to. So again, I type entity and select a new entity, and I create one this time called session. So I've now got two entities, one called attendee and one called session. And they've got their default fields in, like ID and version. They've got their toString, their equals methods implemented, etc., etc. But I want to start to add some more interesting fields to these entities. So obviously, we're going to want some sort of name on our session so that we can track what the session is. And we're also going to want a description. And then I'm going to add a list of who is attending the session to the session. So let me go ahead and start adding those. So the first thing I'm going to do is add the description. I'm going to add my name, and I'm going to add the collection of, I'm going to add the collection of attendees. Let me do that. Okay. Great. So I've now got some fields in the entity. That's pretty good. Now, as this is Java, and we don't have any way of expressing properties in Java yet, I need to add some getters and setters to the class in order so that people can access my fields. So I do that. Now, I mentioned earlier that I'd added beam validation, which allows us to put constraints on things. So I'm going to go ahead and add some constraints to this entity so we can see that in action. So the first one I'm going to add is the size annotation, which is going to allow me to say that the description should be at least 20 characters long and no more than 100 characters long. And I can do that very easily by expressing the fact that you have a minimum and a maximum number of characters. The great thing about beam validation is that you can very easily create your own constraints. So you create an annotation, which is what you put in the class to attach the constraint to a field or to a method. And you also then create a class, the validator class, that actually implements that constraint, implements that validation. One of the really nice things about beam validation is you can compose constraints. So this means that you can take some basic constraints like size, or that a field must be not null, or that that a field must be an email address, and you can use this to build up your constraints. So, for example, if you have a postal code of some sort, you could perhaps say that if the field is a postal code, it must have a size of at least 3 characters and a maximum of 20 characters. And then you could maybe apply some additional logic in order to express how that postal code should look. So we could also add a constraint like not null. So we're going to say that the name of the person cannot be null. And I'm also going to say again that we need a size for the name. So we'll put that one on, and we'll make this a bit shorter. So we'll have to be 5 and no more than 50 characters in length. Okay, that's fine. Do that. And the final thing I'm going to need to do is tell JPA that we have a relationship here. So I use the one-to-many annotation in order to indicate that the collection of attendees is referring to another entity that's in the database. So let me go ahead and also similarly set up the attendee entity. I'm going to keep this one nice and simple. I'm going to say the only thing we're going to record about attendees is their name. So once again, I'm going to put a constraint on that, and I'm just going to copy over the constraints I put on the session name in this case. Do that. Okay, so we've now got our entities set up and ready to go. So the final thing I have to do on my attendee is just generate the getters and setters. Okay, so I've now got something in the database, or something to put in the database. For this example application, I'm using the Hibernate feature, which allows me to generate the tables, the database tables, from the JPA entities that I create. That's a quick way of getting this data into the database. I should say at this point, of course, that you don't have to create your entities in your IDE like I'm doing here. I could have used Forge to create my entities. It has the ability to add fields and add relationships to entities. I could also have created a database schema using SQL and then reverse engineered and generated the entities from that. But for me personally, I prefer working in the IDE. It's the way I most easily think about JPA entities. So that's why I choose this approach. So the next thing we need to do is we've got our data there. So the next thing we need to do is start to generate out some REST endpoints from this entity. So that's pretty easy to do. Again, I do choose Forge, so I'm running Forge, and I run the generate endpoints from entities command. And I'm going to say that I want to generate them for both of the entities I have, generate endpoints for both of the entities I have. Otherwise, I select all the default options. And this is where the magic of Forge really starts, because we actually start to see that over on the left-hand side, you can see as I've got should have got some new classes generated. Let me just look at that.
Hello?
Hello?
We can't see your JBDS. Can you increase the font?
Yes, of course. One moment.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me know. Oh. Okay, so hopefully that's a little bit better now. So yeah, we've got in the left-hand side, we've got the endpoints generated. And so that's pretty good. We can also start to see some of the features of JBDS that allow us to easily interact with our REST endpoints. So again, I'm sorry about the font size. I don't know how to change the font size of the left-hand area in JBDS. It's something I've never known how to do. But you can see we've got a number of REST endpoints there. And JBDS makes it really easy to explore your REST endpoints. So I want to go right on and generate out a UI so that a human can also interact with this. So again, I use Forge. And I'm going to scaffold out the view layer. I'm going to use AngularJS as my view layer. So I'm going to be building a single-page application using the AngularJS JavaScript framework that's going to talk back to my REST endpoints. So I choose scaffold setup. You can see, hopefully, that it says AngularJS there. So I just hit finish. And we've now got AngularJS scaffolding set up on the project. And you'll see if you look in the source main resource. Again, I think I need to read this project. Oh, we'll just keep going. So the next thing sorry, it's not doing what I thought there. And the next thing I need to do is then actually generate my endpoints, generate my view layer from the endpoints. So I choose the scaffold generate, and this time I select which entities I want to generate from. And I can pretty much just go straight through and execute that and get my view layer generated. So let's have a look and see if that's worked. So if I look in the if I look in the source main web app directory on the left hand side, you'll start to see a number of files there. But the easiest way to validate that this is working is quite simply to go ahead and deploy this to the server. So I drag and drop the application onto EAP6 and start up the EAP6 server. Okay, so that's now up and running on the application server. So if I can hopefully visit that in my web browser, I just go to the localhost 8080/RH sessions. There we go. And you can see the application is up and running there. I'm not sure if that's going to work. No, I'm trying to zoom the screen, but I'm not sure that's really going to work on this technology, unfortunately. Okay, let me see if I can just do it this way. Yeah, that works. Okay, so that's a bit bigger. And you can see we've got a single page application. So if you watch the address bar, you'll see that the URL doesn't change. And I can very easily go ahead, the URL before the hash doesn't change, I should say. I can very easily go ahead and create an entity, create an attendee, and check that this is working. So I can put in my name, save. I can go to the sessions and create a quick session. And I can select who's attending the session. Okay, so that's working great. Let's check this all worked. Yep, so that application is up and working. So how about running this on OpenShift? So I'm going to just hopefully reasonably quickly manage to deploy this up onto OpenShift. So OpenShift is Red Hat's platform as a service. We have two different versions. The first version we have here is the OpenShift Online. And this is available on public cloud, and anyone can get up to 3 applications running up on OpenShift Online for free. The second one I have there, which I'm not going to be using today, is an instance of OpenShift Enterprise, which is an on-premise PaaS. So the idea there is you get the software and you can install it in your own data center, and then you have access to all of the nice things you get from a PaaS, like DevOps and provisioning, but running on your own hardware. So let me just check and see. I don't have any applications deployed to my account at the moment, so that should all work. So the first thing I have to do is just do a new application. And I'll talk a little bit more about OpenShift in a minute, because we have a little bit of time, because OpenShift will take a few minutes to get started. So I'm going to create an EAP6 application on OpenShift. I'm going to call it RH Sessions. I'm going to be using a small gear. That's all fine. Okay, and I'm going to connect it through to my existing Eclipse project here. And what that's going to do is mean that the contents of my Eclipse project here is going to be automatically put onto OpenShift for me. Let's see now. Finish. Hopefully this will all go through. So JBDS provides a really nice and easy way to work with OpenShift. As you've seen, the tooling is very easy to use. It's all guided through a wizard, so you can very easily select what you want to do. What happens when what I'm doing here is, when I create an application, is I'm telling OpenShift to go away and set up that space for me on its servers. It's also going to do things like set up the DNS for me, it creates a Git repository, and that Git repository is how I'm going to deploy the application. So as part of this whole beach ball effect spinning thing that we're seeing right now where the computer's thinking and doing stuff, what it's doing is it's set up that SSH repository, and it has cloned that SSH repository down to my local machine. It has then merged all of my local changes with that Git repository that's been cloned down, and it's going to push all of that content back up to OpenShift. What it's doing here is pushing up the source of my project, and it's going to run Maven on the remote machine in order to build the project and deploy it to the application server. And that's what we can see running in the console right now, is it starts to download all of the dependencies needed from Maven. This is pretty nice. This allows me to push up things very simply and have them built in the environment. Whilst that's running, the other thing I wanted to try and show you in the last few minutes I've got is how you use or how you can use Apache Cordova in order to create a mobile phone application. So what I'm going to do here is create a new project in which I'm going to build, or which I could build out the mobile phone UI. So I choose New from the JBDS menu, and I choose the hybrid mobile Cordova application project. So I'll just call that RH Sessions Cordova. Okay, and yep, I want to run Cordova 3.5. And one of the great things about Cordova is it comes with a plugin ecosystem, so you can build your own plugins, and you can also select from a big library of plugins provided by other people. The tooling has really good support for plugins, and you can very easily add them to your project. So I'm just going to start up that project, and that gives me a basic Cordova project to be using. Now, I don't have much time, so all I'm going to do for now is reuse the existing web app I've built and put that into Cordova. So before I do that, though, I want to just talk very briefly about how Cordova works. So what Cordova allows you to do is take a regular web application built using HTML and JavaScript, so using all those skills that you have from building web applications, and it allows you to compile that and run that as a native application on a phone. The reason this is great is because Cordova comes with these plugins that I mentioned, and these plugins allow you to interact with APIs on the phone that aren't normally exposed through HTML5. So for example, if you needed to work with some additional functionality of the phone, you need to go above and beyond the local storage that's available through HTML5, and you wanted to access the more storage that's on the phone, you can do that using the Cordova JavaScript APIs, which then are basically just bridges over to the mobile phone APIs. So it's a really good way to get started building an application for a mobile phone that can reuse your existing skill set. So just to show you how you can get started, I'm just going to literally copy and paste all of my web app over onto the mobile phone project. And then hopefully by the time I've done that, the OpenShift application will be up and running, and we can check that. And then we're going to connect the two together, and I'll show you how we can connect the two together and pretty quickly build out this mobile phone application. So let me just copy and paste all of that in. So I'll switch back to the web browser and just check whether my application is up and running on OpenShift. It's called RH Sessions, that's the name of the application, and then Muir, that's my space on OpenShift. Yep, so there's the application up and running on OpenShift on the internet, and you guys can go out and access that. So going back to the IDE and to my mobile Cordova project, I've now got this application running or available to run inside the Cordova application. As the Cordova application needs a backend to talk to, it needs those REST endpoints to talk to. What I'm just going to do is quickly alter the application that's running inside the Cordova project to talk to the OpenShift application I've got up and running. And that would mean that if I deployed this to a mobile phone, if I deployed this to my mobile phone, the application would work because that application is up on the internet. So to do that, very simple inside the Forge generated project, you just alter where the REST endpoints are located. So I'll just do that for these two JavaScript files. That's done. And now, if I go ahead and want to try this application out, there's a number of simulator options that you can use on your computer to run this application. And that's good because, of course, it means it avoids the hassle of trying to actually get this onto your mobile phone anytime you want to test something out. So I'm going to start with a Cordova sim. This is a feature that's specific to JBoss Developer Studio and gives you an easy way of simulating the application running in Cordova. So as you can see, we've got the application up and running, and it's all working as you might expect. What Cordova Sim does allow you to do is control things like the accelerometer on the phone, or if we wanted to send particular events to the phone. You've got geolocation controls, so you can simulate where you are in the world if you want to access the geolocation APIs through Cordova or through HTML5, etc., etc. Another really nice feature we have in JBDS that makes developing applications easy is the live reload. So what live reload allows me to do is make a change in the application source files and have that automatically deployed to the application without having to do anything. So I'm just going to move my window slightly out of the way so that I can see what's going on. Let me put that over here. And let's shrink JBDS down slightly so we can see both at the same time. Great. OK, so if I've enabled the live reload server in JBDS, and the other thing I need to do is make sure that live reload is enabled for Cordova Sim. So that's running now. And what this means is if I make a change to my HTML sources for this application, so say, for example, I get told that, oh, I can't call this RH Sessions. I have to display on the screen, oh, it needs to be Red Hat Sessions. The brand police have been after me. I make that change there, and you'll see that the application automatically refreshes. So if we're having a bit of lag and it's not working great, what I'm able to do is make the change in the editor and simply save in the editor. And I don't even have to go over to the other screen and hit refresh or anything like that. Those changes are automatically shown to me on that screen. So if you've got lots of screen space, it's a really quick way to make changes quickly in your editor and see them automatically come up in the device. I could then go ahead and run this application on, for example, the iPhone simulator, the Android simulator. I could go ahead and start using some of the native APIs that we have in Cordova. And there's lots of other things you can do as well, like adding tests to the application, adding MySQL database to the application, etc., etc. I'm running out of time today, so I don't have time to go into some of those features. But what I would say is if you're interested in learning more about how you can build applications with EAP, with Cordova, with any of these technologies I've been talking about, check out the Ticket Monster tutorial. It covers all of these, and it goes through it a lot more slowly and in a lot more detail than I've been able to today. So going back to the slide deck, I wanted to, as I mentioned earlier, point you to the jboss.org website, where it's really easy to find your way to these getting started materials. Just visit www.jboss.org and click the Get Started button. You can also find lots of information about all of the middleware products there, as well as opportunities to ask questions, download most of the products we have available for development purposes, download the IDE, etc., etc. So very briefly, I wanted to talk about an exciting new initiative we have called xPaas. So what's xPaas all about? Well, for many years, we've had, JBoss has produced middleware. It's what we're famous for doing. We initially started around JBoss Application Server, JBoss Enterprise Application Platform, and many application builders, people building applications use that. And we've expanded the family over the year to include things like SOA, rules, data grid, etc., etc. But what we've realized is that there are more and more people building applications, and it's becoming more and more important that application builders, application developers are very productive. So let me just give you a few statistics that show why this increase, or that demonstrate this increase in applications and application builders. So we've seen a 1,700% increase in the number of web applications over the last 10 years. We've seen a 23,000% increase in the number of mobile users. And we're seeing that many, many people are really interested in platform as a service because it gives a really good experience for developers, enables developers to be really productive, and enables more reliable applications. But this means, of course, that there's more and more pressure on the people who are building applications. In order to build more and more applications, the number of people building applications has gone up. But what that also has ended up meaning is that there are more different types of people building applications than just your classic developer. So you've got people who are building applications who are building for client and mobile, who maybe don't know anything about the server at all. You've got your back-end developers. You've got people who are doing DevOps. You've got people who are integrators. You've got business analysts. All these people are building applications. They could be building using many different technologies. They could be building using things like Java or Python or Ruby. You've got people using Objective-C or Dalvik to build applications for mobile phones. So yeah, we've got a huge, huge array of people building applications. And the demands of customers are also changing. So we see that we have more immediate applications. They need to respond faster. They need to give people more real-time information. The application needs to be available in more environments. It needs to be pervasive. It needs to be available on a desktop, on a mobile, and also on an embedded platform, in automobiles, in cars, in homes, in offices. And also, we're expecting our applications to be much more aware of us and much more aware of what we're doing. So in other words, the applications need to be proactive, and they need to be responding to what we're doing without us necessarily instructing them to do that. For a good example of this would be recommending directions to something, recommending local restaurants, actually telling us information. And whilst for a very long time, we expected an application to be deployed onto a server and run on some sort of computer or a laptop, nowadays we're seeing that's really changed. You've got applications being deployed to the cloud and accessed using mobiles. We've got big data coming along, which has also changed the way in which we build applications quite extensively. And all this feeds into what we call the modern app builder. Applications are more important, customer demand has increased, and the technology has changed. And we believe that a fundamental shift is needed in order to address these people, address these application builders. These application builders, they need access to a variety of services. They need access to be able to remote mobile applications. They need to be able to integrate stuff easily. And they need to be able to build stuff in a really easy fashion. And this means we think that we need to move to a modern application development platform. It needs to be lightweight. It needs to be cloud-based and allow for easy DevOps. And it needs to offer the full range of middleware services. And this is where we offer the xPaas. And xPaas is quite simply bringing together middleware, the great JBoss middleware stack, together with the OpenShift PaaS to allow for a great DevOps experience. So where have we got to with xPaas, and where are we hoping to go? So what does this platform look like? Well, it's got to be lightweight, as I said. It's got to be built for the cloud. It's got to be dynamic, adaptable, autonomous, and self-healing. How do we do this? Well, there's a number of technologies we have today, and there's lots more work that's also needed on this. So some of the technologies we have today are things like Fabricate, which provides some of that provisioning capability and some of that management capability. WildFly, very lightweight application server. And the other thing that's really important here is that data is the most important piece of this infrastructure. So the management and the virtualization of data is absolutely critical. And a number of our technologies help us with this. So things like Red Hat JBoss Fuse. So everything we do in this area must be based around microservices and be a range of services that are being connected together. We have things like BPM Suite, which allows us to automate business process tasks. And also, this goes back to the point about who are these new application builders. It's not just application developers, programmers, but also business analysts. And these guys need a completely different tool suite and a completely different environment in which to build stuff. And all this comes together to build or to create what we call xPaas. So that's sort of thinking about the next few years. But what about if we think slightly beyond that? One of the very interesting technologies we've been spending time on recently is vert.x. Developers have been building a lot of applications in new frameworks like Node.js. But we found that Node.js has a number of limitations for enterprise, such as whether transactions, security, these things are not well addressed there. So we've introduced or been working on a project called vert.x, which is our approach to reactive programming. And vert.x, quite simply, is a polyglot Node.js that's asynchronous and reactive. Next generation has proven very popular with the community. So if you're interested in where we're going in the long term, do check out vert.x. So to finish up, I would encourage you to visit jboss.org. We recently relaunched jboss.org, and you can find all of the getting started materials that I've been talking about there very easily on jboss.org by clicking that Get Started button. And if you're interested to follow along on Twitter, we have the @JBossDeveloper Twitter handle. So thank you very much for attending. I hope you've learned something about how you can build applications simply and easily using the JBoss stack, and also about some of the resources that we do have available for you here at JBoss to get you started and get you productive very quickly with JBoss technologies.